I now ask Dr. Bridget Moran to come forward to present the Convocation Address. Dr. Moran.
Interesting, this change of glasses. I greet all of you. It's lovely to be here. In late 1955, 18 months after I arrived in Prince George, I married into the Moran family. This Moran name had been the stuff of myths in the Cariboo for many years, thanks to the small leprechaun of a man called Paddy Moran. At the time of his retirement in the late 1960s, he had served as magistrate in police court for nearly 40 years. Among other things, Paddy was famous for his one-liners. One I always remembered was his reply when people wished him luck. Well, he would say, there is good luck and then there is bad luck. When I learned that I was to give this address, I knew that I wanted to talk about change, the ever-whirling wheel of change that Edmund Spencer wrote about over 400 years ago. And I thought of Paddy's saying because I knew that, that like luck, there is good change and then there is change that leaves much to be desired. I didn't intend to talk about anything except changes I believe to be positive. Today is a day of absolute joy to me, and I'm certain that the graduates here and the students share that joyous feeling with me. One of the positive changes I want to speak about is in the field of education as it relates to women. Mary Ellen has mentioned my time in the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service during the Second World War. I am reminded of a presentation I made to fourth-year history students at the university a few months ago. The students were studying the history of Canadian women from 1920 onward, including the period of the Second World War. During my talks, one of the students asked me, "Did you join the Navy because of patriotism or the desire to be liberated?" I replied, "Oh, no, no, my dear, neither of those reasons. The war had scooped up all the young men from where I was and had put them in other parts of Canada. I joined the Navy in order to go where the young men were." So there was that spin-off from my time in service, and a wonderful spin-off it was. But there was one other benefit which perhaps proved to be more permanent in the long run, and that was financial. After my discharge from the Navy in 1946, I attended the University of Toronto and graduated in 1950 with first-class honors and a gold medal in philosophy, English, and history. I wanted to continue my studies in history with a view to teaching in a college or university and perhaps to do some historical research and some writing. As a veteran, I was guaranteed 1 month's financial support at a university for every month I had served in the armed forces. Beyond this time limit, the Department of Veterans Affairs continued to give financial support, provided the veteran achieved high grades. I expected that in view of my academic success, Veterans Affairs would automatically support me in graduate school. After all, hundreds of veterans had received just such extensions. Imagine my shock when the Department of Veterans Affairs advised me that they had conducted a survey of colleges and universities across Canada and that not one female professor had been found. I now know that the investigation was not foolproof. Among others, the names of Margaret Ormsby and Hilda Neatby come to mind. But the scarcity of female history professors was so pervasive that I had no choice but to accept the results of the survey. The government mandarins said they would be glad to support me if I decided to go into teaching, nursing, psychology, or in a pinch, social work. Ironic that. But as a male-dominated profession such as history was out. To make a long story short, I stumbled along with my historical studies for another year and some months. As I struggled to find money for books and streetcar fare, I watched male students pursue the studies of their choice, supported by the same government which had turned me down. 3 months into my second year as a graduate history student, I gave the whole thing up. I hopped the Canadian Pacific train and headed for Vancouver. I think back to that government decision, and I know that in the ever-whirling wheel of change, my experience of 45 years ago could not be repeated today. On this Convocation Day, I am introduced by a history professor, Dr. Mary Ellen Telm. Another historian, Dr. Margaret Ormsby, is sharing honors with me, and my degree is conferred by Chancellor Iona Campanola. As I scan the lists of professors and associate professors in colleges and universities across the land, the names of women are there in abundance. I must add that few women are on those lists as presidents or chief executive officers. But I am convinced that that is a change which is about to happen. Somewhere in the student body today, somewhere in the group of graduates before me, I believe there is a woman who will be the future president of the University of Northern British Columbia, or McGill, or Toronto. Good. And there is another change I've seen over the years that is dear to my heart, and that is in the field of First Native education. My good friend Justa Monk once said to me, if I had to pick one area where the federal government, through the Department of Indian Affairs, inflicted the most harm on my people, it would be in the field of education. It is not necessary for me to recount the history of the time when there was no education for any kind, of any kind for Native children, followed by decades when they were removed to residential schools. The record is too well known to need retelling here. What does bear repeating again and yet again is that once residential schools were set up, generation after generation of First Nations people were alienated from their families, their bands, their clans, their language, their culture. For most of them, at age 15 or 16, whatever education they had received was finished. If a student attending LeJac, for instance, wanted to go on to high school, the closest institution was in Kamloops. As for post-secondary education, it was not until the late 1960s that the Carrier people could point to at least one graduate from a university. My dear friend, Elder Mary John, tells of the time in 1917 or thereabouts when the Stony Creek Band, pressured by the mothers, sent a telegram to the government in Ottawa which said that Stony Creek villagers wanted a school in their own village. This Indian village has 95 children, said the telegram. We can feed them at home then. Mary John says the Indian agent and the church authorities scolded and pressured the band council, and the people at Stony Creek were forced to send another telegram to Ottawa apologizing for their request. Stony Creek did not get its school. This was a situation I found when I arrived in the central interior in 1954 and for long afterwards. The system of residential schools seemed to First Nations people and to me to be set in stone. In fact, it was based on nothing so permanent, and today residential schools are just a memory. In their place, in villages like Tachi and Ianch, with their own schools covering kindergarten to grade 12, in friendship centers, in Native education facilities, in correction centers, in colleges and universities, the Native people are being educated. I know that alcohol, drugs, violence, suicide, unemployment, and poverty are still taking their toll. But to balance that in a veritable flood through institutions of every variety, Natives are quietly training themselves for future leadership. Lawyers, teachers, counselors, foresters, bookkeepers and accountants, health givers, and yes, even social workers and writers. So today I want to say, especially to the graduates and to the student body, that there were long periods of time when changes in education as they related to women or First Nations were inconceivable. And yet those changes occurred and are still occurring. And for you, graduates and students, in the years to come, you will see things that need changing, and many times you will be unable to detect any movement at all. Hold hard to the fact that change is all around you. It is inevitable, it is ongoing, unstoppable, ever continuing. You can't stop that ever-whirling wheel. What you can do is have a part in controlling its changes and their impact on the human condition. And don't fall for the old saw that as an individual you are powerless. Every thought, every action, every word is in final analysis individual, and if yours joins you to the human race, the possibilities to change are endless. Having said this, I know there will be times when you will find inertia, even downright regression all around you, and you will wonder if the struggle is worth the effort. These are the times when some kind of formula or talisman is necessary to help keep spirits up and energy levels high. I was lucky enough to discover mine in the 1940s. Many times it has kept me going when it would have been the easiest thing in the world to give up. Of all things, I found my talisman in syndicated newspaper columns telling the story of a cricket named Archie and a cat named Mehitabel. Archie lived in a newspaper office, and he recorded, as well as a cricket could on a typewriter, the actions of Mehitabel. Most of those actions were scandalous and inglorious. Mehitabel was a very wayward alley cat. As she moved from one disgraceful canine crisis to another, Archie recorded a saying of hers which kept her spirit at the ready for her next adventure. I was one with Archie in deploring Mehitabel's lifestyle, but I found that especially as I grew older, I had a sort of kinship with her spirit, and many times over the years I borrowed her incantation when I found myself slipping into the slough of despond. I quote Mehitabel's words from memory. Toujours gay, toujours gay, toujours gay. What the heck, what the heck, what the heck? There's a dance left in the old dame yet. Thank you.